again, like
Yeah,
I'll restate this
nobody
like I restated
thinks
for
that.
Magnus.
Nobody thinks we won
I'll
Vietnam,
restate this.
dude. No
It
historian,
doesn't
but
matter
you,
what people think.
Jixie,
It
the
doesn't
fucking
matter. It doesn't
brilliant
matter.
guy who's going
It
to be
doesn't
able to
matter.
cook this. This is ridiculous.
Okay,
Come
that's
on,
fine. That's
we did
fine.
not win
That's okay.
Vietnam.
That's fine. That's fine, and you can have
I
your
just wish
opinion,
you
but
would correct
appealing,
yourself. It's not an opinion. It's not an opinion. Uncle Magnus, you are being requested to speak. How are you doing today?
I just want to rephrase the question. How do you would like arguing like in the way of like we all know that America lost the Vietnam War, but how you would argue like that, turning like her argument into a victory, like.
You're going to have to ask Jixie that question. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, like he was saying, like America won the war, but by what measure?
Ask Jixie. I'm going to invite Jixie and then have Magus and Jixie just discuss it. Right? Oh, there they are. All right, Jixie. So, what they're wondering is, how exactly do you justify America winning Vietnam?
Hello, can you hear me? Can
Yep,
you hear me?
we can hear you.
All right, so it's pretty simple. I look at it like this, right? So when we look at specifically the war in Vietnam and our goals, it shifted originally from, to eradicate communism in all of Vietnam, to get rid of the Viet Cong, stop the North Vietnamese from taking Southern Vietnamese sovereignty, or to establish Southern Vietnamese sovereignty, kind of similar to the Korean War, right? Vietnam and Korea are very similar in their late war goals. And to shift a little bit to a hypothetical, if I were to, say, for example, come to you and you're getting bullied, and I help you deal with the bully, and I'm like, okay, I'm leaving. The bully's gone for now. That's it. I can't do anything else for you. You have to handle it on your own now. And then I leave, and then the bully comes back and kills you. Is that my fault? Did I lose the conflict I had with the bully? No, I didn't. I simply ended the conflict, right? And then you inherited that conflict in which you lost. So when we look at, say, for example, America's involvement in Vietnam and the overall conflict with the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong won no battles. There was no battles won by the North Vietnamese or the Viet Cong. Right, we took substantial land from them. They were in mass retreat before the 12 bombings, the 12 days of bombings that eventually led to the Paris Peace Accords, right? So all of these things that, happened and led to the end of the war were all in America's favor. And then that peace treaty, that deal, was in America's favor. All of that was pushed to America's favor. It wasn't because we were close to losing the war. It was not because things were getting bad for us. The Tet Offensive had failed, right? The Viet Cong had failed, and the North Vietnamese had failed in the Tet Offensive. There was no reason to suggest America was retreating, right? There was no reason for us to retreat. The only reason we see, for example, America, come on and say, we lost, was really a domestic political loss because of how bad the political backlash of Vietnam was, right? We were sending off sons to go die in a war for communism, or against communism, rather. So, I mean, if you say purely that our early war goals that were to eradicate communism from Vietnam, I would say, yes, that would be a loss. But then you'd be neglecting and not acknowledging all the other goals in Vietnam that we had completed. So, that's my argument, right?
Go ahead, Magus. I'm not going to jump on it.
They make these peace treaty.
Yeah. Okay, I can hear you now. You're
under the
condition
that America would give air support.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that was promised by Nixon.
Yeah. Even though those promises didn't go through, I mean, of course, there was things left on the back end, like even in other wars, we give promises that we don't necessarily keep, like with the Mujahideen, how we said we'd invest in rebuilding Afghani infrastructure post the Soviet-Afghan war, which we didn't follow through with. So, I mean, I guess, but I don't think that's necessarily criteria for loss. I think that's criteria for being a bad ally. Um,
Um,
so, and like I said, I mean, even then, if you did say that was criteria for a loss, I don't think it necessarily means total loss, because, like I said, if you were to say even then that would mean a loss, you'd be neglecting all of the other late war goals that we had that we completed.
I mean, the main goal was not to let it become communism, and
Well, that wasn't the main. That
1975
was
it was
that, by the end of
communism.
the war. By the end of the war, that wasn't the main goal.
So
I mean,
let it not become communism was not the main
you do
goal
acknowledge
anymore.
that. No, well, late war goals. That was not the goal. Was to eradicate communism from Vietnam. It was to establish South Vietnamese sovereignty. Like, you do acknowledge that, right? Like, the narrative is
Yeah, but
the
everyone was
narrative
probably
switched.
knowing
The
that the
narrative
South
the
Vietnamese
narrative
cannot
switched.
hold itself.
Well, no, well that's a completely different thing, and then that would mean the South Vietnamese lost the war, because we left on a victory. We established this border, right? Much how we established the DMZ along with the newly found UN in Korea. Well, it might have been the UN. I don't know when the UN was established by year, but like when America established the DMZ in Korea, we left on a win, right? Like, I would establish that as a win, right? We stopped two sides from killing each other by our late war goals. Is the same we did in Vietnam. That's why I compare the two so much. So when we look at the Vietnam specifically, and we look
But
at
they're
how
two completely
and we look
different
and
wars.
we
In the one war, you gave like literally a demilitarized zone secured by your
well,
soldiers and by
wait, what's the
international
difference?
soldiers.
Wait, what's the difference between having a DMZ and separating borders? Other than the DMZ is just a bit of a thicker buffer zone, a buffer
The
zone.
big
What's the
difference is
difference?
that like the other side not easily can cross that area.
Neither were trusting. What does that matter?
It matters a lot.
I mean, yeah, but I don't really see how this matters to whether or not America won the war, because like I said, when we look at late war goals, we absolutely accomplished them, and even then, I would grant, like, say we only got 50% of them. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese won no battles in Vietnam. There was not, I don't think, a singular battle where we tucked our tails and ran and lost the battle. Um, so I again ask you, where do you get the narrative from that we lost?
From world history, from my
From
university,
world
the
history? Okay.
university.
Well, let's talk about world history. I mean, yes, there's a slight consensus that there was a possible loss, but there's no like direct history. Like, there's historians that say we won, and there's historians that say we lost. The same way there's historians who say the Nazis were the good guys, and there's historians who say the Nazis are the bad guys. So if your reliance is on world history and what historians say, we can cite historians saying
Yeah,
different
you will
things
be
on both
surprised.
sides.
You may be
Can you give me one
surprised, but
historian that says the Nazis were the good guys?
I mean,
in
yeah, there's
history
historians who
is
say that.
constant important. In history is constant important. When the majority of the historians are agree that the war was lost, it was a loss. What
Well,
a little minority
is
of
that a
historians are saying is not matter.
wait, hold on. So just because historians simply say something, that means we could go with it? I mean, I think that's a little
That's
not
how it
very
works.
independent. No,
That's
I
how
don't
it
think
works.
that's how it works. I don't think that's how it works. I think we make
That is.
innovation based upon disagreement. We make innovation based upon disagreement with each other, right? Like, so when someone says something and says, "Oh, this is," say for example, "Oh,
That's not how it works in
this isn't
history.
true." Well, that is how history works. Like, going back and analyzing history and figuring out whether or not the consensus is true or not, is exactly how we analyze history and, like, prior history. So
Yes, but then you
simply
need to
because there's a
deliver good
narrative, and
arguments. You need to deliver good arguments that the other historians accept.
simply because there's a narrative doesn't necessarily mean that should be the crutch of your argument, because it's not really an argument. It's pretty weak, actually, if you're relying on a historic consensus that you're kind of pulling out of your ass. So I again ask, what criteria does the Vietnam War meet for loss if we met pretty much all of our prior, like our late war goals apart from eradicating communism from Vietnam, which we did eradicate communism from South Vietnam, which was the nation we established by the time we ended the war. So
A
what
nation which were clearly not
criteria for
capable of
law?
defending itself, but beside of that,
Yeah, okay, but then that'd be a completely different topic. That wouldn't be our loss. That would be South Vietnam's loss. Yes, we did fail in some way to ready them for war, but that wouldn't be our loss because they decided to fight that conflict. So we had no involvement in it. The only involvement we had in that small skirmish, which quickly led to the fall of Saigon, was the evacuation of the American embassy, and I think 1974, which there was no real conflict. The North Vietnamese didn't really attack American troops at the embassy. They just left. We left. So
I mean,
I
here
really don't.
on one point, you're actually correct. Consent is many times rewritten in history. That's true. But therefore, it need to come out a really good article, which is like with good arguments for like a rewrite in history.
Okay,
And
but
it's mostly based.
So,
it's
but then
mostly. Can I finish? Can I finish? Is that possible with you? It's
Sure, go ahead.
mostly based on a lot of articles around that, and beside of that, it is in history generally constant. It is. It's the way it works.
I mean,
can't change
I
it.
don't think so. I don't think so because you want to have a debate with me about like whether or not we won Vietnam. Why are you relying on? Oh, it must be in an article. It must be in this. It must be in that. I can get prior service members who tell you we won in Vietnam and they can give their argument. I can give you article. I mean, I can give you anything, right? Like there are sources for literally anything. You can find a source that water causes cancer, right? But that doesn't necessarily make it true or false, right? Like we have to break these things down on our own if we're going to have a debate about them. I'm not relying on like someone arguing the argument for me. I'm arguing it for myself and coming to my own conclusions, which is what I hope you do the same if you want to have a debate with me about it. So when I come to you, or when you really come to
just
me,
to know. I just wanted more to know, like how do you explain the
well, what do you find my points to be reasonable? Like, because it's all true. Like this is all historical.
Yeah, I know.
Like, all of these things are true.
I know.
So
I know that's the funny thing. I know the peace treaty, everything I know about.
Yeah, so then I would assume that you would think my reasonings are justified and reasonable on why I believe that we won the war. Because there's a difference between winning the war, total victory, total loss, and like there's different types of victories, right? Like we have like military victory, you have domestic political victory, you have narrative victory. There's a lot of different victories or losses when it comes to war. If you said Vietnam was a political loss, I'd agree, right? Like political Vietnam was a disaster domestically in the United States, right? Almost everybody hated it. But if we look at it militarily, all we see is American domination throughout the entirety of the war, to the point where we established South Vietnamese sovereignty. Like, so that's why I ask. I mean, like, again, like, what's the point? Like, is it justified? Is it not? Is it reasonable? Is it not reasonable? Like, give me your opinion.
I mean, it was not really sovereignty since like the thing is like.
Well, it was. They had their own government for like 5 years. They had their own government.
Even South Vietnam knew they couldn't hold their sovereignty.
Well, they did.
No.
Wait. They did though. They had their own government. They were beginning a government structure, and even if they knew they weren't going to be able to win the war, they still tried, right? Like there was still conflict in Saigon. Like you do know that, right? Like there was still South Vietnamese soldiers fighting in Saigon to try to hold Saigon. So like,
yeah, that was a joke.
I mean, and this is like the funny part is like. It's actually kind of ironic that it took the Americans beating the fuck out of the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, and then for them to be able to pull out of Vietnam to give the South Vietnamese the reins for North Vietnam to win a battle. That's ironic to me, right? We say that that Vietnam was a loss, but it took the Americans leaving Vietnam for the North Vietnamese to get a victory. Isn't that a little ironic? We say that we lost, but the moment we leave, our enemy finally wins. Isn't that a little ironic there?
I would like to debate this with you, Jixie, if you would like.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, go ahead.
Can you do me a favor and Google who won the Vietnam War?
Yeah, that's not an argument, Amanda. That's not an argument. This argument simply isn't one off of who won. Like Google this and like what Google tells me is true, right? Because like I said before, that we have to break this down and analyze this conflict and look at the facts of the conflict, right? So a simple Google search, sure, like there are some sources, like I said earlier to Magnus, that oh yeah, we won, we lost, right? Like there are people who say we won, there's people who say we lost.
I point you to this. Command Magazine issue 18, specifically going to the conclusion that is found on page 15. And if you are viewing it from the website, then it would be from page 16, where it says the conclusions regarding the Vietnamese War. The Tet Offensive was a military disaster of the highest order for those who launched it. That is not surprising, since the operation was based on a plan that defied military logic by flouting the principles of mass, economy of force, and simplicity. Less recognized, though, is the offensive matchmaking of political bankruptcy. The communists in Hanoi were guilty of a kind of groupthink that had led them to bank everything on their infatuation of the revolutionary ideal of a mass uprising. In so doing, the North Vietnamese leadership sacrificed a potent weapon, the Viet Cong, and their ability to persecute long-term revolutionary war. At the same time, the political hand of their enemies in Saigon was strengthened. The appreciation of the offensive in the United States, however, was tainted by biased and pessimistic journalism. The fear and loathing quickly festered into a rejection of Johnson and the eventual retreat of the U.S. from Vietnam. Tet, in fact, points to Lyndon Johnson as the worst war leader in the United States that ever had the misfortune to suffer. In a broader sense, it probably shows Lyndon B. Johnson was temperamentally unfit of the presidency. He had been the power nexus of the Senate and a major force of the Democratic Party, but he lacked the equanimity, stability, and decisiveness needed to lead in war. Johnson was not the first American politician to find domestic government and wartime leadership are different things, but his personal discovery came too late to save the Republic a terrible scarring in Vietnam from conquest. The Tet Offensive was a decisive event in the process of expelling the United States from Vietnam. That was not because of what the communists did right, which was very little, but for what the Americans' enemies did wrong. So here you go. Primary sources.
What you just read kind of proves my point, right? The Tet Offensive was a disaster. It was led by the Vietnamese, the North Vietnamese, and the Viet Cong, and was terrible. It didn't work.
Does that sound like a victory to you for us? Is that a victory?
Yeah, because the Tet Offensive wasn't us.
Why did they talk about Lyndon B. Johnson being... If we won Vietnam, why are they talking about Lyndon B. Johnson as the worst ever? Why would they do that if he won?
I mean, it's an opinion piece.
Is it an opinion piece?
That is no base in fact. That is no base in fact.
No, but then what is the Paris Accords? We literally retreated. Jixi, we retreated.
I have a
we
question
retreated.
For you.
I got news for you, right? If you and me got into a fight and you started running away from the fight, I got news for you. You lost the fight.
So I have a question. If this, I want to ask you, if this meets the characteristics of retreating. So the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong win no major battles, no battles at all, for I think all of 5-6 years. We beat them and even in Cambodia, where some Viet Cong rebels ran to, beat them in Cambodia, and then bombed them for 12 days straight. And they come to us asking for peace negotiations. And when we finally talk them down and get them to allow a sovereign South Vietnamese border, and we tell them that they are not to attack them, and they agree, and then we're like, okay, we're finally going to pull out.
I don't know why
I don't think that sounds like a retreat. I think that sounds like a decisive victory based upon a treaty after we bombed them and they came to the table. Because I think one thing we need to remember is that we did not go to them for negotiations. They came to us, right? We didn't come to them asking, can we leave?
Well, I mean, let's be fair, right? We have to acknowledge that the whole purpose of the Vietnam War was to stop communism. And I got news for you. They're not this this bastion of capitalism that is that is in favor of the United States interests in 2024. They're not. In fact, they're the exact opposite of that, right? That's an indication that we lost the war.
Sure, and you know that would be true if it wasn't for the fact that that was our early war goals, which yes, I agree. We failed in those goals.
Yeah, we failed.
If you say
lost.
That, but if you say that, then you are also neglecting all of the other goals we had in that war, which later shifted to a narrative of establishing South Vietnamese sovereignty and establishing a democratic government in South Vietnam, and making sure communism didn't prosper there.
The United States enters in Vietnam.
Hold on, if I could please finish. Thank you.
Bro, I'm not going to let you filibuster. In the United States, they entered into Vietnam with the principal purpose of preventing a communist takeover of the region. Did it fail in that objective?
No, I don't think so.
You are out of your mind. You are now contradicting yourself.
China is state communist.
We're going to do it. We're going to try it again. We're going to try it one more time.
China is a state China runs on a free market. Vietnam has
American
corporations running through their borders.
Look at my stream. It says those. This is straight from Britannica.com. Those who won the Vietnam War, those who argue that the United States opponent won the war, cite the United States' overall objectives and outcomes. The United States entered Vietnam with the principal purpose of preventing a communist takeover of the region. In that respect, it failed. Okay, that's Britannica. You're saying that the opposite is the case with your high school education. So tell me, how exactly did you come to your conclusion? Do you acknowledge that the United States entering into Vietnam?
You have to let other people speak when
you
ask
I just need you to answer it, right? You need to correct your statement, right? Because you're just wrong. It's just wrong.
Yeah. So listen, right? When we look at how, like I said, right, if we were to only talk about that narrative, that would be true. But like I said, there were other goals within that war, and to neglect those is to neglect the history of the conflict. The goals within the war, late war goals, were to establish a sovereign South Vietnam that was free of communism and to push back the Tet Offensive, which we did. We stopped the Tet Offensive. We stopped the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong from winning any major battles in Vietnam. We stopped them from taking South Vietnam while we were in country, and the only time the North Vietnamese or South Vietnamese
when they took over was when we retreated with our tails behind our backs.
It was not a retreat. Okay, like I asked you before,
we retreated.
Is it a retreat? Okay, again, I'm going to ask you this before. If I beat the dog shit out of you, I break your nose, I smash you in the face, and the only time you're able to get a quote-unquote victory over me is by beating up my infant little brother. Is that a victory, or were you a coward after I left after beating your ass, and you said, okay, I'm done, right? Because that's what the North Vietnamese did.
Well, take for example, if I say that I'm going to have trash in my lawn, and you can't stop me. You show up, you beat my ass, and then later on you back away because you realize that I won't stop fighting forever, and I got a bunch of my cousins, and then you just decide that you're going to stop fighting, and then I just leave the trash out on the lawn. I got news for you, bro. I won that fight.
Yeah,
so that's how that works.
That would be true if that's how the conflict went, but that's not how it went. So when we bombed
that is how it went. That's literally exactly what went down.
It's not how it went. It's not how it went. And if you knew anything about Vietnam,
bonkers,
you know that's
bro.
not how it went. So again, like
nobody thinks we won Vietnam, dude. No historian, but you, Jixie, the fucking brilliant guy who's going to be able to cook this. This is ridiculous. Come on, we did not win Vietnam.
That's fine. That's fine, and you can have your opinion.
I just wish you would correct yourself. It's not an opinion. It's not an opinion. It's really not an opinion. We lost Vietnam. I'm sorry.
Simply appealing to that narrative is fine. Like whatever helps you sleep better at night. But you can run away from the facts of the conflict.
I think you are like a kid, and that you end up deciding things that are antithetical to the reality of the situation. Because I don't know, maybe you just like thought experiments, kind of like a flat earther or something. Like, we didn't win fucking Vietnam, bro. We didn't.
The facts of the conflict state.
I gave you the facts.
Yeah,
I gave you the facts.
The facts of the conflict show that we bombed them for 12 days straight. We didn't go to them asking for peace negotiations. They came to us. And like I said, they won no major battle. They won no major battles over the course of like 5 to 6 years. They won like I said, no battles in Vietnam were won by the North Vietnamese or Viet Cong.
That's beside the point, Jixie. We are the ones that retreated. We're the ones that retreated. It doesn't matter how many battles they lost. It's called guerrilla conflict. You lose every single battle until they get tired. Wait, now I got a question. No. Actually, I'm kind of curious. Who won the Revolutionary War in the who won the Revolutionary War between the Brits and the colonies?
It would be the Americans.
Really? How so? They lost pretty much every battle against the British.
Well, no. So they won the Delaware. The French were at sea stopping British shipments. The Vietnamese War and the American Revolutionary War.
We lost pretty much every battle to the Brits.
But the problem was we did win.
So how did wait? How did why did we win? Why did we win? We lost pretty much every battle there, Jixie.
No. Well, the difference is the North Vietnamese won none.
No. Back to the Revolutionary War. How did we win?
Yeah,
how did we win? How did we win?
We won by help with the French.
How did we win? Come on, you can do it. How did we win?
We had the French.
What did the Brits do? What did the Brits do, Jixie?
I need you to calm down.
No. I want to know. What did the Brits do that caused us to win?
You're looking like a clown right now.
No, I just want to know. What did the Brits do that caused us to win?
They lost. They left.
What did they? Oh! Wait! Stop! No way! I'm getting a chubby. So hold on. Are you saying that the way that we won is because the Brits retreated? Is that what? No.
That's a little disingenuous, and you're having a little bit of a freak out right now. And I want to ground you in reality again that the Revolutionary War and the Vietnam War are not comparable. Okay. They're not the same conflict.
Jixie, stop. You understand why I'm trying to bring this up regarding the Revolutionary War, right? Because it's very similar in the sense that it is a guerrilla warfare where the United States, or rather the colonies at the time, were losing repeatedly over and over to the Brits. Now, there are like a handful of battles where they were successful in, and they were losing a lot of lives. And then the end result was the Brits were like, all right, screw this. We're just going to leave. We're not going to bother with this anymore. And then guess what? Decisively, like among historians, they say that the United States won. Why? Because the Brits retreated. Correct. That's exactly what happened. The Brits retreated. So now, when it comes to Vietnam, right, it's actually kind of similar in that aspect, right? Really big, strong military shows up in Vietnam. They fight each other, and then what happens? The United States retreats, and because they retreated, we lost.
So you're actually wrong about the Vietnam War. You're actually wrong about the Revolutionary War. I just did a little bit of research. Out of the 25 major battles of the Revolutionary War, America won 13, and the British claimed victory in 12. So that's actually not true. We didn't lose almost every battle. We won almost every battle. We won.
That's not more than the British almost every battle. We lost more than we won.
We won more than them. Wait, no, wait, what do you mean? We lost more than we won. We won 13 and the British won 12. Simple math will tell you we won more than the British. And so when the British are at war and they're not, also, by the way, this was not the expeditionary force that the Americans had in Vietnam, like the massive armed force. The British had a flagship force in the colonies. And if you really want to go down this rabbit hole, we can. It doesn't really prove your point well, because we won more battles than the British did. Right, and so when we look at this conflict specifically, we will see that obviously they had help from we had help. My headset cut out. We had help from the French, right? Because the French were at sea.
That's beside the point. You're missing my point. My point is that when the opponent retreats, that is tacitly saying that they lost. Right? Whoever retreats from battle, that's it. That's the end. You
if I
lost.
could
You
please
didn't
finish,
win by
I
tucking your
if I
tail
could please
between your
finish.
legs. It's not how it works.
If I could please finish.
I'm going to let you finish,
So-
but is there, by the way, just FYI, is there anybody, if you could type in side chat, anybody who wants to tackle this? This is fucking bonkers. Or I don't know, maybe Daniel wants to tackle this because this is too brain rot for me.
So again.
All right, Dylan
right,
would like to, so go ahead. I'll let you finish, and then I'm going to bring in Dylan.
You kind of slipped up, and you're like, oh, well, we won less battles in the Revolutionary War, which turned out to be false. We won 13 over the major 25.
Oh, forgive me.
Right, so when we look at this conflict specifically, and we look at how the Revolutionary War happened, it was a relatively small force compared to what the British were actually capable of. We actually managed to get help from the French as well as the Spanish fighting the British somewhere else on the globe. The French were able to stop British shipments. There was a lot more there that makes it non-comparable to Vietnam. And yes, I'd agree that if they were to retreat, it would be a loss. But the problem is it wasn't an American retreat. There was nothing there that signified a retreat. It signified a strategic into the war because America was at home suffering political loss, which was true. Nixon ran on the whole, I'm going to end the Vietnam War, and that's actually what he did, right? So, and like I asked, again, if I shoot up your house, I bomb you for days and days and days, I run you into Cambodia and then bomb you in Cambodia and then kill half of your soldiers.
Illegally,
and
we might add.
You came to me asking for peace. How is that a retreat? How is that a tucking my tail and run? Because you came to me asking for peace. I didn't come to you. You came to me. You wanted to sit down at the table and say, okay, let's end this war. We're tired of our people dying, right? So, again, I don't really see where you see this as a retreat or a loss, because literally any other military conflict where this has happened, it is not considered a loss. It's considered a victory, right? Because you bomb your enemy into submission so you can finally establish.
Are you done making the same repetitive point over and over again? Like,
well, nobody will engage with it. If you don't engage,
you did engage with it, bro. You're just doubling and tripling down on this stupid point.
Exactly.
Okay, no, all right. I'm gonna step out. Daniel is gonna step out. We're gonna let Dylan.
Okay, Dylan, go.
I wanted to ask Dylan if I could make a point before he goes on.
Go on.
If you allow me, Dylan.
2v1. Either one of you go or one of you don't.
No, Jixie, it's like nobody was talking to you.
I'll just turn you down because I'm not gonna get 2v1.
Let's let Dylan go. Let's let Dylan go because I'm genuinely curious.
I didn't come up here to get 2v1. I didn't come up here to get 2v1. So go ahead, Dylan.
Okay, perfect. So again, I understand the point that you're making, but it seems to be, number one, you're not understanding the comparison. Neither are the things that you're mentioning important for this comparison, right? It doesn't matter whether or not the U.S. had allies in the American Revolution. The entire point was, could England have won the war if it continued the war? Yes. Could America won the Vietnam War if it continued the war? Yes, it could have. Why? Because it was a larger empire that had the resources to go full into it. Same thing as England. But what did England say? England failed at its objective, which was to take back the colonies, bring them back in, and not waste any more money that it was getting bankrupt. What happened? England continued being bankrupt and said, we fail at our objective, it's time to get out of there. So they decided
Dylan,
to
the
leave.
problem there is, though,
The same thing with the U.S. No. When you continue on with this point, you're going to let me finish. By the way, this point of you saying that just because historians, first of all, it is a historical consensus that the U.S. has lost the war. I would ask you, what historians are you mentioning, right? And I'm asking this because I am a historian. A lot of historians do not agree with that premise. That
I don't care what historian. I really don't care. I don't care what a major narrative says. I do my own research.
Oh, let's analyze it.
If you do your own research, if you do your own research and you analyze a conflict by yourself, you can come to your own conclusions. I don't need to. I don't need to fall. I don't need to. It's not objective. This is not objective.
It is completely
objective. And if I could please finish, because you've been kind of running on. You threw like 3 things out there. Things I need to reply to. You threw like 3 things out there I need to reply to. So one, yes, this would be true. This would be absolutely true. We would have lost if we lost the majority of battles like the British, but we didn't. The British lost 13 out of 25 battles in the Revolutionary War.
No. You're not responding to what I said. Again,
I am. I'm responding. I spoke 5 words.
Why did the
I
bigger nation
I
decide to
spoke
leave?
I spoke
No, but I'm
5
going to make
words.
sure you respond to what
You can't say I'm not responding. You can't
You
say I'm
are
not
not
responding if
responding.
I spoke 5 words. You cannot say
You're
I'm not
not
responding.
responding to the
Because
allies have
you're
nothing
not
to do with this.
if you
We're stuck on
refuse
the
to
same
listen to
point.
someone speak, if you refuse to listen to someone speak when
I
they're
have
trying
no
to
problem
talk
with when you
and
do
you
this.
want
Because
to,
you would
I'm not
constantly
gonna
have
let
this
you cattle me. I'm
sentence
not gonna
me.
let you I'm not gonna let you
You
cattle
answer the
prod me
question. That's
into
all I
going where
asked.
you want me to
Answer the
go with the
question.
conversation. I'm
Answer the
gonna
question.
answer your question, but you have to let me answer the 3 points you gave out.
What were
So
the 3
one,
points? Can you even tell me what the 3 points were? Because there's only one point.
one, of course, right? So when we look at how the British lost, it would be absolutely comparable if America lost the majority of battles it had in Vietnam, but it didn't. And that's the problem we're having here. And that's the problem I'm having. We're comparing 2 separate conflicts with 2 separate conclusions. The British lost 13 out of 25. They claimed victory on 12. That is a historical consensus. That is factually true. That is from British records and American records from the times, right? So even if you throw out the Allies, fuck the Allies, let's not mention that. We can look and see the British lost the majority of them, and then when they lost the Delaware, they left they left the colonies, right?
That's not the end
That
of the
would be a
war.
loss. That would no, it
That's
technically was.
objectively
That
wrong.
was pretty
No.
much the end of the conflict.
What
That was
was
pretty
the end
much
of the
the end of the
war? What is
conflict.
the end of the war, Jinxie?
So I'm gonna continue speaking. So
No, because you're
once they
spitting
lost
out
the
loud at this
Delaware,
point.
once they
But
lost
you're
the
not.
Delaware and they
But
were
you're not.
encircled,
No.
it was pretty much over. So and
When they
then
were encircled
after
at
they
Yorktown.
retreated, they left, right? And then America began to build its own.
When was
And
the
establish
Battle of
the
Yorktown?
Constitution in 1776 and all of these things, right?
When was the
Doesn't
Battle of
matter.
Yorktown, Jinxie?
The Battle of Yorktown was the Battle of. I'm not gonna go into semantics with you, dude.
Not semantics. It's about dates. We're
The
talking
Battle
about
of
history.
Delaware.
It's about
Okay,
dates.
okay.
History has nothing to do
I'm
about
gonna finish.
semantics. It has everything
I
to
let
do
you
with
finish. I let you finish.
Bro,
I'm gonna finish.
but no one.
I let you
again,
finish. I'm gonna finish.
No,
I'm just
you're
gonna turn you down so I
rambling.
can finish. I'm just gonna turn you down so I can finish because
You
I need
think
to be able
that's
to
a great way
finish.
to have a debate?
You come up here
That's
and I'm
a
not
great
gonna
way to
let
have
you
a
just
debate?
and blow your way through my argument. You managed to get your point
Because you
out. I'm
have
gonna get
no
my points
argument.
out. So
I
again,
blew
like I
through it
said, I'm
because
gonna
there's
restart from the
nothing
beginning.
there.
That yes, of course, we managed to secure victory in 13 out of those 25 battles against the British. If the British were able to beat us in the majority of battles and then they left, I would not call that a retreat. I would say they were leaving because they established their goals and got what they wanted. But again, 2 different wars there. The British were trying to establish colonies again in the Americas and take back their colonies, while the Americans were simply trying to dispel communism early in the war, and then late in the war they were trying to establish a sovereign South Vietnam. So they're two separate wars. They're not comparable at all. It makes no sense to compare the Revolutionary War to the Vietnam War because 2 different conflicts, 2 different endings, and like so many variables that are just completely different. Even like the reasonings on why you'd bring them up don't really line up. And so when we look at the Vietnam War specifically and how the Americans bombed the Vietnamese 12 days in a row, and you had the 12 bombings of prisoners, and you throw them back so far into North Vietnam, and then they finally come to the talking table. If the British blew us back all the way to fucking Colorado, right, all the way west, and then fucking took over the entirety of the United States, and then they said okay, and then we came to them and asked them to fucking talk and retreat, that wouldn't be a retreat on the British. The British won. They got their fucking goal. But the problem is, we look at these things in history and we're comparing these things. That makes no sense. The Americans established 3 things: a communist-free South Vietnam. They managed to beat the Vietnamese in every major battle, and they managed to bring the Vietnamese to the talking table, which they did not start. Right, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong came to them first. So when we look at these variables in the conflict, it's impossible to say that it was a retreat rather than a strategic pullout to give the South Vietnamese the reins of the conflict or the reins of their own government, right? Because when we look at these things, I really don't see how it's possible to say that, like I said again, it was a retreat, right? Like I would love to hear your justifications on how that's a retreat and how they're comparable.
Again, you rambled off about something completely different that I did not make any
I was telling you how it makes no sense
because
to compare the conflict.
because you haven't answered the question, nor have you answered the point that I make. You said, "Oh, you made 3 points. I'm going to respond to all 3 of them." Again, you said the same thing you just said 20 minutes before I even got up on this page. So I'm going to ask you the point again. The point that I made was that the U.S., right, when it left Vietnam, right? It had the potential of going back and winning it. If it had stayed and continued the war, and in a hypothetical situation, if you didn't have the domestic issues that we had with the Vietnam War in terms of everybody protesting anything, the U.S. would strategically, which is what you're basing it off of, could have won the war, right? And it's the same thing, the same comparison is being made to the English when it comes to the American War. Now, since you're focusing on the strategicalness, you're focusing on the number of battles won and saying that's the reason why they're not comparable. But it's not. Okay, it has nothing to do with the point that's being made.
That's not the only reason. That's not the only reason.
The point that I made was the comparison is the fact that they both have the same reasons for why they eventually withdrew from the conflict. Let's say not retreat. Let's say
they're not the same reason.
withdrew. They are. Then what is the different reason for the English withdrawment?
So
in American Revolution?
the reason for the English withdrawment, in like say for example like obviously the American Revolution, they realized they couldn't establish the colonies. They lost. Their flagship forces had been pushed out basically to the water. Right? They'd pretty much been pushed off a cliff. So that's one thing. Right? That's why the British pulled out. That's why that happened. That is a fact. And then when we push to, say, for example, like I said, the Vietnam War, the Americans were not pushed fucking anywhere. The Americans kept pushing north. The Tet Offensive failed, right? We pushed them into peace negotiation talks. They didn't push us into talks, right? So you cannot compare these two separate conflicts. They're not comparable. And after this point, I refuse to engage with revolutionary comparison because it makes no sense. They're not comparable in the slightest. The British, yes, could have came back with a flagship force, again, to try to fight the war, but it was, right? When we look at these it makes no sense. You can't compare these conflicts because
they're similar in
the
the sense
variables
of
aren't the
war.
same. Yeah, but the Americans hardly fought a guerrilla war. It was majority Minutemen conflict. But
that's a guerrilla war.
Hardly.
Minutemen conflict is literally guerrilla war.
Minutemen war. Do you know what Minutemen war? Do you know what a Minuteman is? It's line conflict.
Well, I mean, it depends if you're talking about like things like the Green Mountain Boys, or like you're talking about
like,
people
again,
like controlling their specific like region that they particularly own in areas that they themselves are civilians. And yeah, it's effectively guerrilla warfare, right? That's what that is.
I mean, yeah, sure. Like a part of it was asymmetrical, but the majority of it was line conflict. It wasn't asymmetrical. Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. I'd agree with you if like the majority of it was asymmetrical, but like when we look at like the Revolutionary War, the majority of it was line conflict.
The point what I'm trying to bring up to you is that for whatever reason, you think that
also,
the United States won the Revolutionary War, but for the reason that the British retreated, and it is also the same thing that the United States retreated, it is fair to say that we lost the Vietnam War on that basis.
Hey, so I have a question
for
you.
So if we have, for example,
did we get pushed to the ocean?
The Revolutionary War was a win because we took over the land. Vietnam, Crave said it best. Vietnam was a loss because we did not accomplish what we set out to do, and Vietnam gained nothing from it. It was a zero sum, right? Nothing happened in our favor as a result. We lost. We retreated. That is not a historical.
Hold on, wait,
There's literally Dylan here who studies history, and just FYI, right? You sat there and denied other people who are historians, right?
Well, no,
and you said under the basis of your own personal research. Yeah, okay. So then you can't say that's ahistorical, right?
So
it's an anti-Jixi, but it's not ahistorical.
It's ahistorical, and I'm sure,
oh
Dylan,
my
if you study
God,
history,
bro, this is so
Dylan,
dumb,
I'm
dude.
sure if you,
I'm gonna give you the last word, and then we're gonna move on. That is wild.
Yeah, I'm
dude.
sure, Dylan, if you study history, you'd know that it wasn't nothing for South Vietnam. The South Vietnamese wanted sovereignty, which the Americans gave them. The Americans managed to stop the Tet Offensive. If the Tet Offensive was successful,
the objective, though. That was not the objective of the Vietnam War.
If you know anything, hold on, Dylan. If you know anything about the Vietnam War, then you'd know that yes, we failed on some goals. That's true, but there were also a majority of war goals. No, they're not the goal. The goal shifted. The
No.
goal shifted near
So
the
you're
end of the
moving
near the middle to end of the
so
war.
You're moving the
No,
goalpost
I'm
in
not
order to
moving the goalpost.
justify
I'm
that
not
the
moving the
goal was
goalpost.
completed. It
The
just
American,
I'm astonished at your ability to just
the
completely
American
ignore
military
all
moved the
points.
goal.
First of all,
The American military moved
you're
it
the one making
in like
a
the
historical point.
70s.
You are saying that based off of your subjective interpretation, right? This is the
No, it's not
historical
subjective.
interpretation that yes, it is because
It's not
you said
subjective.
you made the
It's not
research.
subjective.
You're saying you're
But that's
subjectively
not
went out and found
subjective.
the research.
Research isn't subjective.
Right?
Research is based upon
This is
fact.
the analysis, you analyzing it and getting to this conclusion, going against the historical consensus of historians, entirely means that it came from subjectiveness. Show me
Okay,
why
anyway,
it's
that's not true.
objective.
Anyway, so let me finish.
You
So
haven't
again,
named one historian that agrees with you. You don't even know.
Yeah.
You don't even know
So,
historians that agree
I
that the
don't need a
Vietnam War
historian to
was
agree
not
with
us.
me. You're falling back on
Dylan, you
consensus
should let him
for some
finish.
reason.
You only talk
you-
like 80% of the time, please. Come on.
So again, well, I was told that we'd get the last word and move on, so I just wanted to wrap up my
All right,
point.
go. I'm
So-
gonna give Jixie the last word. I'm gonna move everybody down.
Yeah.
Right. So
Only 15
And
minutes.
I'm gonna give
just to
Jixie
wrap
to
up
give
my
the
point.
last word. Go ahead, Jixie.
Just to wrap up my point. Okay, when we see the British losing, the British got pushed to the ocean. The Americans pushed into North Vietnam and stopped the North Vietnamese and brought them to the peace tables. So the conflicts are comparable. There's no way to say that it was a retreat because it wasn't a retreat. We managed to push farther in North Vietnam than the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong were able to push into South Vietnam, and we were able to establish South Vietnamese sovereignty, which is what part of the war goal was, right? To establish South Vietnamese sovereignty free of communist control. If you disagree with that, you can argue with the American government. I didn't move the goalpost. The Americans moved the goalpost in the middle of the fucking war. So if you have a problem with that, that's fine. But if you are a self-proclaimed historian like you say, Dylan, then you'd know that this is the truth, right? This is very well documented in world history. You should have learned this in high school. You should have learned this in middle school. You should have learned this in college if you went to college to study these things, right? And that's all I have to say about it. That's it, really. That's really all that needs to be said.
Good talk, Jixie.
Yep, perfect.
Do you want me to tell you what the most frustrating thing was about that?
My desperate
me.
desire for
No,
better
no,
high
I'm gonna
school
tell you.
education.
The amount
I don't
of
know.
times, no, the amount of times Jixie said Vietnamese instead of Vietnamese. I don't know why he had such a hard time to say Vietnamese. I mean, I don't know. It's amazing. But if you give me 1 minute, I want to take his side, and I want to tell you about the time that I won the battle. I won the war against a piece of pie. Okay, so the thing is, look, I was a bit fatter, right? I wanted to lose weight, which I did eventually, right? But in the beginning, you know, it's like I was still like a fatty.
I don't want to go at him.
No,
When
this
we're
is about
already
me.
Done.
This is about me. It's not about
It's
him.
about
It's
you
about me.
winning
I
a
swear.
war against a piece of
swear.
pie. Okay, go ahead.
A piece of pie. And what I did, so I had this piece of pie, like juicy as fuck, apple pie, you know, really good, right? And I said, you know what? I'm gonna win the war. I'm not gonna eat the pie, right? So when I started, I said I'm not gonna eat the pie. But no, the pie was there, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to change my goals. I'm only gonna eat 25% of the pie. And I just ate 25% of the pie, and then the pie, the rest, the 75% was still there. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to revise the goal again. It's only half the pie, right? And I ate another 25%. The rest of 50% was still there. And then I kept revising the goal. And at the end of the last goal that I had was like, I'm just going to leave these 2 crumbles, right, of pie here on the plate. And I did it. You know, I didn't eat the crumbs of pie at the end. Right,
Okay.
so I technically won the war against the pie. You understand? That's how you win. That's how you win. It is what it is, man. I don't know why you're all harping against Jixie. That's how you win wars, right?
Strat Deck, you are being invited to speak. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. What did you want to talk about?
Well, it was sort of about what they were talking about before. I just wanted to make a quick point, if I could.
Sure.
Yes. So I don't see where Jixie is really coming from, because he is talking about small tactical victories that they had against the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong, but the overall strategic objective, which was initially prevent the fall of South Vietnam, prevent the spread of communism, the US failed in those objectives because obviously, as we know, Vietnam fell under communism, and that is how it is today. So there is no scenario, and I don't know any historian that is arguing that the US won in Vietnam. If anything, it was a humiliating defeat.
Well, according to Jixie's personal research, you're wrong, Strat. I'm not going to listen to stupid, dumb historians, right? With their own personal. He can think for himself. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, he's free to think for himself, but what he's thinking is completely, completely opposite of what occurred in reality. You know, there is no scenario where you could see the US winning with how they did, because obviously they had internal problems at that time, you know, domestically, and there was a strong anti-war movement because the war was illegal and they wanted to withdraw, and that was achieved. And yeah, I mean, he's arguing that the North Vietnamese didn't win any strategic battles. I mean, well, I mean, you could argue the Tet Offensive, although it was a disaster, was a strategic and political victory for them. And obviously the fall of Saigon, which later became Ho Chi Minh City. And the parallels you can draw to like Afghanistan, where the US and coalition forces, their goal was to eradicate the Taliban and prevent them from coming back into power. And as we know, that didn't happen either. So there are some similarities you can draw from that.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I learned, I remember just reading like from my history book or various history books, is that usually when you're on the defensive of a guerrilla war, the one that is on the defensive of the guerrilla war tends to win, right? And the reason why is because the war effectively is unwinnable. You've got, you know, areas where people are in their homeland where they basically control that region. They are familiar with that region, and they themselves are citizens of that region. So no matter how big your military is, no matter what, right, you're going to be dealing with nasty things like traps, you know, as an example. You know, people are sitting there in their homestead thinking, okay, well, there's going to be a foreign invader. I'm going to start, you know, laying out tripwires. I'm going to lay out traps. I'm going to dig holes. I'm going to do all sorts of stuff that's going to make it really, really annoying for, you know, any foreigner to come. And you're going to be aware of the traps. Whereas, you know, so this one person, right, a single person, you know, just having control over their house can actually really harm dozens, and if they're really good, hundreds of potential soldiers. So for every one person, especially over the fact that they themselves are a citizen and we're like post-Geneva Convention, you know, guerrilla warfare is really the winning strategy on any front. I mean, even how advanced our military is, you know, in the United States, you know, when it really push came to shove with the guerrilla warfare tactics of the Taliban, you know, or not really, you know, of Al Qaeda, the Taliban, as well as various fights in the Middle East. I mean, we won some, but I mean, let's face it, man, we lost the fight in the Middle East. We did, right? We retreated, and the end result is that's the end. And I don't see it's any different for the Vietnamese people in the United States. I genuinely do not understand the position of Jixi. I don't get it.
Yes. No, as I don't understand it either, because as you correctly were saying, Vietnam in particular, the landscape and environment suited the defenders more, considering it was such a jungle environment, and particularly with the, you know.
There was also like some of the traps. Have you seen some of these traps?
Yes.
Hold on, let me see. I just want to like point, like there's like a really good diagram that like showed these traps. I mean, it's a nightmare. It's not a good situation. Let me see if I can find the full. I got it right here. Yeah, this This is
I think
nuts.
what you guys are talking is like that's a war of attrition, and basically what the North Vietnamese did is just wage that war of attrition onto the Americans,
All
right?
right,
And it's like eventually you're not going to be able to do it anymore.
So I'm going to share it, right? So you can see like the bait, Viet Cong decoy lures American infantry into a trap, right? Here's an instance, a spider hole, a sniper waiting for Americans from an entrenchment from where there's an easy escape into the tunnel system, right? And look here, the bait, right? For example, this Viet Cong decoy jumps into this little hole, goes through, and he knows there's this tripwire there, right? And there's like a zigzag. So like basically it's like it's a 60 to 120 degree zigzag of the tunnel. It basically causes the American soldiers to not have a clear view into the tunnels, right? And that's just an example of a tripwire. Imagine if there's a Viet Cong just sitting there waiting for you to turn a corner, right?
Yes.
And here we go. Niches located deep in tunnels where the Viet Cong wait for Americans passing. So little tiny holes, right, where they're just waiting in there with their guns, and it's like an American is what? You know, they followed the bait, and there they are in a Viet Cong tunnel. There they are in the Viet Cong tunnel. I mean, guaranteed this person's going to die. I mean, look at this classic pit trap with punji spikes. Like this is a nightmare. And then another one. Look at this, a mini infirmary, right? Caves equipped with medicine and special ventilation where the wounded gorilla could just rest in bed and gain strength. Like, bruh, what, dude? Wait, this guy's got a cinema underground. They found a cinema underground, just FYI, they did, right? These are real things that soldiers would need to resolve. Look at this, right? Instance where a guy has to crawl through here, a garrote ambush where Americans push their head through a narrow manhole, and then the Viet Cong are sitting there waiting with a garrote, waiting to choke you, right? Soldier with stick. All that technology and soldier with sticks got you hidden in a niche, covered in a thin wall of clay, right? So it looks like a wall. Viet Cong could see the American coming through a little viewing hole and then stab them with spears. This is a nightmare. What do you mean? Like, there is no winning this.
No.
What are you going to do with this? You're going to throw another 100,000 bodies at it? And then, mind you, right, they've got assistance coming from North Korea as well as China. They've got Chinese soldiers and North Korean soldiers fighting in this war, and it's like no wonder why we decided to retreat. This is a nightmare. Scorpion trap. Americans stumbling over a string, a door open, filling a tunnel with scorpions. A mine well. When faced with a steep shaft in the tunnel, grenades would fall on the Americans from above. After throwing them, the Viet Cong would close the entrance and hold it down with a sandbag. This is a nightmare. This is just death. Right? Yeah. These motherfuckers are cooking in there. They're cooking, and they got a bike generator.
Yeah.
They're collecting water. What is happening here, bro? We're literally we got to fight the what's it called? The oh my god, the natives in what's it called? Oh geez, I'm trying to remember the name. The natives of Arrakis, Fremen. We gotta literally fight the Fremen over here.
Yeah, I mean, I can go off Daniel's point that the North Vietnamese were in this for the long haul. So a battle of attrition suited them quite fine because a prolonged conflict did not suit the US and their allies. And as we saw, the US was ultimately forced to withdraw because there was no way I could see that they would win this. Certainly not on a short-term scale. And similarly to what Jixi was trying to argue with the American Revolutionary War. Some historians try and argue that the British could have won that had they directed more resources and troops to the US colonies, but the colonies weren't that profitable for the British. Instead, they were more preoccupied elsewhere. So it's sort of like...
I mean, ask yourself, right? and someone asked that it in chat. They said, "Are there McDonald's in Vietnam?" Probably not, right?
I'm pretty sure there is.
Is it really?
No.
Yeah, like recently, they've been like opening
Oh, they've
up
been.
to the West.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
There's
Yeah.
a chance.
That's different, though,
Yeah.
right? I mean, well, the fact. I mean, to be fair, right? Like, I personally, and Daniel will fight me every step of the way. I believe it's only a matter of time before something, communism just kind of collapses on its own. I don't think it requires the United States to like stop it, but that's just my own
Vietnam
opinion.
is not communist either, so
A communist ideal is, if I could,
yeah.
that
Maybe.
is my point. They have the idea. I understand they're not technically a classless, moneyless, stateless society, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think,
but they're a bit socialistic, right? I mean,
I-
they have a lot of good social programs in Vietnam, and even if they're like a poor country, they actually do a lot better when it comes to the happiness of their citizens than other bigger countries.
I honestly thought we were going to talk about more modern stuff, but here we are talking about Vietnam.